And we are recording
Uh-oh.
with Mr. Michael Yon. And as I was just telling him before we started, I went to a walk-in clinic this morning, and doc's pretty sure I have norovirus. So if at any point during this podcast I run out of the frame, it's not the FBI. It's me shitting my pants. And Mr. Yon's a professional, so he's going to keep talking as I run out of the camera. But for now, man, let's just dive right into it because I know the internet's been spotty in the past. Immigration. Let's just get right to it.
Okay, yeah, yeah. If you got the runs, you got the runs.
I
So,
know, right?
uh, it's funny when I was in the wars, with the British. I was in Iraq and Afghanistan with the British, and when somebody gets the runs like that, they put them in a special tent so that they
Oh,
don't infect everybody else.
oh,
They call it
fuck.
the zoo.
Oh,
I'd be
fuck.
like, where's Tommy? They'd be
Oh,
like,
fuck.
Tommy's in the zoo.
Oh, makes sense, man. Dude, it's like
Yeah, they call it the zoo.
it's not the grocery, man, it's like a column of lava coming out of your ass. It's like an odd exorcism. Sorry, keep going.
The Exorcist. Yeah, so you're in the zoo. Luckily, we're
I am.
separated by
I
this
am.
electronic buffer. Well,
I
I'm
am.
actually in Georgia right now. I'm in Tbilisi, Georgia, not Atlanta. I'm in the Asian Georgia. Well, actually, it's in the European Union now. And I was just down in Armenia. Drove up a couple days ago. I was down in Yerevan and all over Armenia. Actually, very interesting. And you can see Armenia is actually being flooded with aliens. Some are remember there's the HOP, the human osmotic pressure. The human osmotic pressure is that push and pull of migration. And you see the war in Ukraine, which is very close to where I'm at now, is causing a lot of human osmotic pressure. It's pushing a lot of Russians here that don't want to be drafted and that sort of thing. For instance, I was in a tea shop today having some matcha of all things. It was a Japanese tea shop run by a Russian man. Yeah, and he was a young Russian man. So here I am in Tbilisi, Georgia, in a Japanese tea shop run by a Russian man. So it's cosmopolitan. But a lot of the Russians are coming to Armenia and Georgia and other places to avoid the draft. Also, Ukrainians. So you see a huge amount of Ukrainians that are also escaping the war. It might be the war combat itself, like in their villages or whatever, or they're just escaping the draft. So there was a lot of those in Armenia and now in Georgia. Georgia and Armenia, like Armenia, for those who don't recall their maps, it borders Iran and Turkey and Azerbaijan and where I'm at now, Georgia, right? And so and Georgia, of course, it borders with Russia and other interesting places. So the bottom line is we're in the middle of the stuff. Well, we're on the edge of it. We're not in the middle of it. But so the migration, the human osmotic pressure is quite intense. Now, I see a lot of people from Georgia actually coming into Arizona. Like I was in Arizona at Yuma recently, numerous nights watching people come across the border from Mexico, and a lot of them were from Georgia. And interestingly, there's actually a Georgian community in Tucson, quite a large one. So it makes me wonder if that's where they're going. I actually always liked Georgians. I first started to get to know some when I was in Afghanistan. They were there deployed with with the international forces fighting in the war, and they were actually stationed in Hor Province, Hor Province, if you can say that in Pashtun or any of the languages that are up there, like Hazar. But Hor Province, this looks like Tibet. It looks like, I mean, it's unbelievable.
Sure.
It's so high and dry and just anyway. So there's a lot of there were Georgian, not a lot. There were some Georgian troops up there who were with the Lithuanians in the middle of Afghanistan, in the middle of nowhere. And I started to get to know them. They're quite pleasant people, and I meet Georgians quite a lot. Actually, it's a small country, but they get around. And now there's a lot coming into the United States. I see them crossing all the time. And there's this one particular area, I think, where a lot of them may be from. I'm going to head up there the next couple of days and root around and see if I can find any of their families and talk with them and see what's going on. But the place here in Georgia is peaceful right now. It's nice. It feels safe. There's a lot of graffiti around. I always look for graffiti as a sign of, decrepitness and danger, but it doesn't actually feel dangerous here. I think it's a little bit more of an edge than Armenia, but which is pretty safe. Armenia felt extremely safe, except for the drivers, like normal. The deeper you go into Asia, or Massachusetts, the worse the driving gets.
I was about to say,
So
that's ubiquitous, man. I went to college in southern Georgia, and I'll never forget my buddy Grant in Valdosta, Georgia. He had a Cadillac with no
that's the other
windshield.
Georgia.
Well, yeah, that's the other Georgia. No, but I guess we're on point here now. Talking about Georgia, my buddy Grant had a Cadillac with no windshield and buggy tires. And we drive through cornfields at like 80. He'd be like, "Yeah, if you hit a deer, you might get some spray on you." And it was like that was it. But I feel like that's probably pretty ubiquitous across the globe as you get deeper, quote, in a woods, that the driving, I guess, boundaries and expectations drop.
It's true, but in some places, let me tell you what, especially like in India, where a lot of people believe in reincarnation.
Yeah,
Whoo, that driving is epic, man. I used to drive around. I was in Afghanistan 2 years, and I spent a year of that alone, just out with people and whatnot. And my good friend Tim Lynch, who's a former Marine, retired from the Marines, we used to drive around Afghanistan together. And he would always talk about how bad the drivers are in Afghanistan. I was like, man, this is nothing compared to India. The Afghan drivers are like the safest drivers in the world compared to India, and
yeah,
by comparison, those who've been in Afghanistan. Anyway, but when it comes to the migration, in some cases, it's actual migration. It is people just moving from here to there for whatever reason, and it's not because they're being weaponized, right? Or maybe they actually are being weaponized, but in a passive way, right? But you'll see there's many ecosystems that are flowing into the United States and into Europe. So in other words, I mean, Georgia's part of the EU now. This is like, they're not actually using euros here though. They use their own money. But what I'm getting to is a lot of the migration happens like you might move from one part of the same town to the next part of the same town because you just don't like the drive, or it's a nicer neighborhood, or your job's there, or whatever. And then there's the human osmotic pressure that's caused by things like famine and pandemic and war that causes people to really, it's like a fire, you got to get out. And so right now, what we have is the World Economic Forum and the Chinese Communist Party in collusion are creating a huge amount of human osmotic pressure and information war and other forms of facilitation to get millions of people into the United States and into Europe, right? And so there's specific reasons for this to overthrow our governments, which at this rate will be successful if they continue. If we don't stop them, our government will fall. There's no question in my mind. I mean, I've been to too many conflicts and wars. I feel like an oncologist who's been treating cancer around the world, or at least describing it for years and years in different wars and conflicts. And I come home to my own country and I smell the room and I see the symptoms and I say, and it clearly does, right? And at this rate, we clearly will go into war.
yeah.
And so that's what will happen with Europe as well.
So when
Go
you
ahead,
do,
you had something to say here.
no, you're good. Yeah. So when you do look at that, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Is you've been to so many of these situations, and when you can see when you're a professional arsonist. My cousin's a firefighter. He's about my same age, and whenever we're in a bumblefuck New Hampshire, lighting shit on fire and throwing stuff that probably shouldn't be burned on the fire, he always has a level head that he looks at. He goes, "Hey, this shit's about to get out of fucking control." Like he knows that it's about to like get a little rapid, and that's kind of how
Yeah,
you're
he's a
viewing
fireman.
yes,
He's
that's
like,
how you're viewing the United
this
States
gets
right
to the
now.
point where even the fireman can't control it, right?
And he's
You know
nuts.
what I mean?
He's fucking nuts.
Yeah, yeah,
Like he's crazier than he's
yeah,
far crazier than me. But even he has a
yeah.
somewhat sober mind to look at it, right? And he goes, "Hey, like this is all fun and games. Like I know we're drinking and having fun. It's July 4th, but there is a level that the BTUs of whatever the fuck is going to do and whatever the fuck is that, it's going to reach a point where we can't control it." And I feel like that's maybe
Yeah,
what you said it. I've had other I've had other Green Berets on this podcast say that. I've had Delta Force guys say that. I had Dale say it 3 days ago. He's like, we've seen these things. I've had on ground branch guys. I've had on 6-7 ground branch guys who are like, listen, I overthrow small governments. I know what the signs
right.
are. I massage them
Yeah,
into place, and I'm watching them now
right.
in our own homeland. And if I'm not mistaken, that's what you're seeing.
Oh yeah. I mean, we're clearly going to go. I mean, I at this point, I'm not sure how we get out of this without a war. I mean, I don't see a way to turn this ship around in the Panama Canal, so to speak. I mean, and I don't see us backing out. Right? There's no backing out. We're going into it. I mean, that's quite clear. And remember, it's all about conditions. It's not about sparks. There's always sparks. You're playing with fire out there, and if the conditions aren't right, it doesn't matter what you throw in that fire. If it's rainy and
I think
forests,
I think Dale
wet in
I think Dale literally said this shit like 72 hours. I'm not even kidding. Like sparks and forest fires and wet wood. Same shit. Yeah.
That's
Uh,
it. That's it. I mean, like I'm in Darien Gap all the time. You could have a fireworks factory blow up down there
doesn't
and it
matter.
wouldn't matter because it's a rainforest. You know what I mean? It'd be a smoking pit. It'd burn for a day or so and it'd go out without any assistance from humans. But when you got that low fuel load, the people in California or whatever never let it get cleaned out. They never let the natural burns or controlled burns go through. You're building up all that fuel. Here comes the drought. Now the conditions are right. There's going to be a spark. There's always sparks. There's somebody like you playing with fire. There's a bolt of lightning. There's a car crash, whatever. We don't care. This is plane crashes. There's always a spark, right? And that's the same way with war. It's about conditions, right? It's the same way with famine, usually, right? Actually, there's different types of famines that I've been studying famine intensely for the last several years. And I've discovered one of the things I've discovered is that there's nobody, it doesn't appear that anybody actually studies famines as in say faminology, right? Or pandemic.
Really?
There's nobody that really, to my knowledge, studies pandemic at a PhD level, right? Like pandemicology, let's call it, right? I mean, there's epidemiology, right?
Sure.
There's virology and bacteriology and all that. But what I'm getting to is famines they have their own life, right? Regardless of how it got there, the famine. The more books I've read on famine, which is a couple dozen now, and more than 60 on pandemic. So I've read more than 80 between pandemic and famine. So it's a proper literary recon. I've been around the world several times reading books on this stuff.
Sure.
But what you'll find is like a pandemic has a life of its own. Like let's talk about like in relation to a fire, for instance. If a virologist studies the details of viruses and how they work and these sorts of things and how they spread and everything that they can about viruses, right? But so whatever causes a pandemic, whether it's viral or bacteriological or whatever, that is separate from what the pandemic itself then does. Because this thing, for instance, pandemic, one of the things that you'll often see is pandemics will lead to famines, right? And there's specific reasons for that. I mean, a big pandemic. And so then you get into this famine thing, and famine also has its own life. Like, for instance, famines both of those will cause a lot of human osmotic pressure, the push and pull of migration. And famines will create more famines. And pandemics will create more pandemic. One of the ways I've learned this on my own, just reading so many books. For instance, how can a pandemic create more pandemic? One of the ways that it does that is that it creates human, or at least not necessarily create, but spread and create, right? So one of the ways that it can do this is why I've been warning about Darien Gap for 3 years straight now, that we're going to end up with pandemic come through there, because it's all about conditions. Now you see all this malaria and dengue and other things popping up now. I'm highly cognizant of Bill Gates and other people's mosquito research, like the Chinese Communist Party and the drones and whatnot that they can use to deliver mosquitoes and whatnot. But separate of that, even if they did not exist, the huge amount of people coming through from at least 140 countries through all these different conditions out in the jungle, eating foods they don't normally eat, encountering people they don't normally encounter, encountering all sorts of stuff they don't normally encounter. And in small tents together and buses, you end up either picking up novel viruses or whatever you pick up out there, and then you spread them to other people, right? Or you pick them up from, if you're, let's say you're in a war and you've got a lot of human osmotic pressure and you're migrating all the way across, 20 different countries or whatever, you're taking your sicknesses to those villages and towns and whatever, and you're picking theirs up and delivering them in other places, whether it be fleas or lice or whatever, all these different things, because life has a way of hitching a ride, right? So, and Mother Nature is quite serious,
Yeah.
Mother Nature wants to get somewhere and she finds a way, right?
She doesn't give a fuck.
But all these things, yeah. So when it comes to, let's say using a fire analogy for these things, a virologist would study, let's say how a chemist would study how these curtains in front of me would burn. Okay, the chemistry of this couch that I'm sitting on or whatever, there's certain things that are given
Yeah.
off and that might be toxic. That doesn't describe what humans do when there's a huge fire in the building, right? People get stuck in the doors,
They
the lights
panic, they
go
freak the
out.
fuck out. There's
Yeah,
this
the lights go out because the electricity goes off.
there's
All of
an
a sudden the
there's
floor
an
is
event
slippery.
horizon of panic.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of things that don't happen during your rehearsals, right? For instance, all the sprinklers go off and suddenly the floor is slippery and you don't have any shoes on and it's freezing outside. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
This is
Okay.
so irregardless of the chemistry of the fire and the couch and then the chemist, like let's say the virologist, if we're talking virology or viral a pandemic that's chiefly caused by a virus, the virologist can talk about that virus all day, but he doesn't know
That's no
unless he
idea.
studied it or she studied it, that doesn't tell you about how the big pandemic unfolds. That's a whole separate thing. I
Right.
mean, the panic and the streets clogged and now the spread, fire spread. So that's what I'm getting to. So the more you study, the more I've studied on pandemic and famine, the more I realize, first of all, fire. What does fire do? It gets out of control and it does what it wants to do. Fire creates more fire. That's
Mm-hmm.
its natural thing to do if the conditions are right. When the conditions are right, fire makes more fire, right? When the conditions are right, pandemic creates more pandemic, right? Because for instance, if it causes people to scatter out of these places where they live, they'll both bring that pandemic with them, well, unless it's like, yeah, I mean, not to get into details, but basically, let's say they'll bring that one with them, and then they'll pick up other stuff along the way, right? So it's like those fireworks that have submunitions, like boom,
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 boom.
boom,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
boom, and you'll get the same. You'll get the same with famines. It's quite interesting. For instance, not necessarily a local famine that happens on a specific island. Like for instance, Ireland is pandemic. I'm sorry, famine is endemic to Ireland. Well, in islands in
Yeah,
general.
yeah. You have
But one of
something
the
against the
things you
Irish
always
people?
get.
You have something against us white guys?
Yeah, I mean, I was there last year actually, but I mean, but I mean, it's an island. I mean,
Yeah.
islands tend to really get a lot of famines, and like Japan has had hundreds and hundreds of famines. Mostly they'll be localized, but I was just there months ago studying that. Actually, went to some famine museums and read some books. Anyway, but the bottom line is one of the ways that actually hunger can lead to famine. I know that sounds kind of weird. Wouldn't famine lead to hunger? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
They're kind of, but one of the ways that hunger can lead to famine is quite interesting. For instance, let's say it's early 1920s in Germany, Weimar Germany, and hyperinflation, and people just cannot afford food, right?
Yeah.
So there's actually plenty of food. Actually, there's often famines in places where there was plenty of food, which sounds like, well, how can that be?
Yeah.
Actually, the more you study it, the more clear it becomes. One of one of the ways that this can
Probably
happen
start
is,
eating
let's say
shit
during
that you shouldn't eat or
hyperinflation.
you shouldn't cook.
Yeah, and that can pick up diseases. First of all, let's say there's plenty of food, but you cannot afford it. So you
Yeah.
start to steal it, right?
Yeah.
So you start to steal it from the trucks and the boats and the trains and the stores and the warehouses and directly from the farms. And then the farmers and the people stop transporting it. And the people stop growing it because so that second season, after the farmers get robbed, and I was warning this in 2016 when Europe was like, let all these guys in. I'm like, listen, man, I spend most of my life outside of the United States. Like 2/3 of my life has been overseas in Asia and Europe and Middle East. And, I've been all over the world.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I spent 2/3 of my life outside of the country in these countries, right? And I know exactly what happens. People just start stealing from the farmers, and then the farmers stop growing. And now in that second season, you go from people just did not have the money for the food, therefore they started stealing it, to now the farmers aren't even growing it and people aren't transporting it and people are hoarding it as well, right? So now you start to get into this vicious cycle, right?
Mm.
And you get this cycle of, wow, the hungrier people get, the more they're willing to do to get it,
Mm.
it's like a fire. The heat creates more fire, right? And then at some point it'll reach its natural apex and it'll
Mm.
diminish, and people say, wow, those people were stupid, we would never do that. and
We'll
then you
never
do it
do
again.
that. It would
Right?
never happen
Right.
again. It would never happen again.
That would never,
That
Nazi
wasn't.
Germany would never happen to us. We're not that stupid.
Yeah,
And then,
even
and then
though
you
they
see
went
what's
into
going
it
on.
saying,
You're right.
even though the Nazis went into it saying, "quote unquote," it's for your health. Was is like Geseltung Führen. I mean, literally the words "for your health" sounds an
Yeah.
awful lot like 15 days to flatten the curve. Oh,
Gesundheit.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Gesundheit.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right. We do see that. Um, um, more focused on the Darien Gap though. I think you were tweeting something last week when we were going to do a show, and then your internet shut out because Klaus Schwab said that he didn't like us. You were talking about something specific about was it flu like symptoms, but it didn't have flu like remedies. What could you maybe clarify that or expand on that?
I mean, I didn't make
Well,
any
yeah,
diagnosis of what it was, but there were
no,
some
yeah,
other people, and I
no,
copied
you're
and pasted some of
retweeting
it.
shit.
But
And
yeah,
there's people
but
saying
yeah,
like we're being told to go
yeah,
home, but
yeah,
these aren't normal
yeah.
symptoms.
Yeah, like in a recent group that I was down there with, or I led, actually, 5 out of 6 got sick, right? And then this group of missionaries recently, this would be about 1 month ago, 8 out of 11 got sick, right? And so 5 out of 6 of them, I was going to take Jordan Peterson actually, and I recommended no joy on this because people are a lot more people are getting sick than normal, and I can't explain it. It's not just the rainy season; it's something more. And malaria, like I just got a message yesterday again from another Imbara Indian. Seems like every time I talk with somebody now, it'll be like I just got a message from an Imbara Indian. Someone in his family got malaria. Well, I just
Hmm.
got another message from another Imbara Indian friend down in the Darien Gap that one of his close family members just got malaria again. Right. So I mean, it's just like I can't even keep track. It's like and the years before this, I mean, that is the Darien Gap. Panama's famous for malaria and dengue and yellow fever and all sorts of things like that. And but they malaria, like for instance, most of the Embera and Wunan Indians that weren't getting malaria until all these migrants started coming through, and now it's epidemic. I mean, there's so many cases of malaria there that it's actually everywhere, and actually now it's Costa Rica and all the way up. Now we're seeing malaria pop up in all over the place, Florida, Texas. And I've been warning about typhus now for several years. I know it sounded crazy, but now we see scrub typhus, or at least a report of it, North Carolina. I've mostly been warning about epidemic typhus and especially epidemic typhus. But there's 3 major types of concern for us: murine typhus, which is spread by fleas like rats and mice. That's what I call it, murine. And then epidemic typhus, which is spread by lice. That's and it's obviously the same. It's also typhus. And then there's scrub typhus spread by chiggers, right? And those somebody apparently has gotten scrub typhus in North Carolina. I see scrub typhus in India, Bangladesh, that sort of thing. And I'm very cognizant when I'm over there, to stay away from places where I think I can pick it up. Typhus actually always goes with famine. That's why they call it famine fever. And if you read, just pick up 5 random books on famine and read them. And at some point, you'll get to the point where they start talking about typhus. I don't care which famine it is. At some point, they'll be like, then the fever came, right? They always, famine fever. So they call typhus famine fever. They also call it war fever. They call it
Typhus
hospital
Mary.
fever. They call it, yeah. No, that was that was typhoid.
No,
And
typhoid.
actually,
Sorry.
interesting. A lot of doctors mix up typhoid because I track both on my Google Net Alert. So every day I get all these cases for typhoid and typhus around the world, and they're completely different. They start with the same 3 letters, and so
Odd.
so
Weird. Yeah,
but
yeah.
they're actually
Confusing
completely different.
etymology.
And so but actually you'll see a lot. I would say 40% of what I see in the news, or 30% mixes them up. You know
Really?
what I mean? It's like,
Holy
yeah,
shit. I only
it's
know it.
incredible amount.
I got to interview
Yeah,
to totally jerk myself off here. I got to interview Charlie Duke, who was on the Apollo 16 moon mission, and he was the reason why
yeah.
one of the guys couldn't go to the moon, and they called him Typhoid Mary. And yeah, he still talks about it.
Oh,
I think it was
did
in
he
Apollo
get
13.
typhoid? All right.
Yeah, now I don't know. Now you have me
Yeah.
questioning myself. I'm like, was it Typhus Mary or
Yeah.
Typhoid Mary? I have no fucking idea.
I doubt that he got typhus. He could have. He
It's
could have
one of
gotten
them.
typhus, but I
Some
mean,
Mary.
But
I have no
actually,
idea.
typhus and typhoid are quite serious,
I have no
and both
idea.
of them are quite. Actually, interestingly, the Dutch, the way they curse, sometimes they'll be like cancer,
Yeah.
krebs,
Yeah.
or
Well,
they'll
they said
say,
they
they'll say
fucked with him. They
typhus.
got onto the Saturn V rocket, and he said he was getting into his seat, and they put like I guess whatever the equivalent of a sticky note was in the '60s, and they wrote Typhoid Mary on the back of his seat, or I guess typhus. I have no idea. You have me questioning everything I know now. Typhoid, tryptophan. I have no idea.
Yeah, yeah, they're both quite deadly. But
Yeah.
typhus is actually one of the interestingly, like this interesting chat group I'm on in Texas. They were just talking about typhus yesterday because I've been warning this group for a couple of years now, and I've been warning about it online for 3 years now. Because one of the things you'll find in pandemics is typhus is often one of the offshoots of you'll get that. That's one of the other pandemics that will come out of the first pandemic, right? And there's specific reasons for this. Actually, let's go back to famine, and then we'll work our way back to this famine. One of the reasons that you can get so many, like typhus, you always get in all the books that I've read on famine, typhus always shows up, and they call it famine fever, and in epidemic typhus specifically, right? And usually a few months into the serious part of the famine, if it's a slow burn famine that comes, by the time you're into it a few months, you'll start getting a lot of famine fevers. So huge amounts of people start dying from it, right? So it's spread by lice and fleas, different types, and chiggers, but mostly lice in this case. So one of the things that happens is the entire population, let's say 10 million people or so, is weakened by malnutrition, right? So now the whole ecosystem of people, their immune systems are depressed,
Yeah.
right? They've eaten all the pets. Some people definitely go to cannibalism. That always happens. And now people are doing anything. They're eating tree bark. You'll always see people eating tree bark, eating grass, leather. I don't know why,
Sawdust.
but
Yeah.
people
Yeah. Leather's a
sawdust for
weird thing.
sure.
Isn't leather like
Leather,
salty or something?
people definitely you'll always see. Then they started eating the leather shoes and every time,
I
and
think I
eating
ate
mud
leather
of
when I was
different
like
sorts like
10. I
pica.
think I chewed on leather
Yeah,
once when I was like 10.
People always go for the leather. It must start smelling better or something. But
It probably
people and
smells somewhat remotely to meat, and when you're in a starvation mode, your CNS probably kicks in, and it's just like fuck it, it's the
yeah,
closest thing to food. Sorry for interrupting.
that's all right. And one of the things you'll see too, you mentioned sawdust. You'll see that pop up a lot in books on famine, and especially they'll start when you start seeing product fade. Like you'll see a lot of bread that's filled with
Yeah,
sawdust.
yeah,
Yeah, and so you'll always see that sawdust starts popping up in food products. It's
yeah.
just a matter of time until we're seeing sawdust product pop up. Somebody will be in some big grocery store and say, "Hey, I got home and my bread had clear sawdust in it," And I mean, so it happens all the time. Anyway, so people get weakened. The entire population is weakened, right? So now the whole population conditions are set for things to just roll right through it. People are living without electricity. Water's not clean. Things are just not moving, and so including people. Interestingly, in famines, oftentimes, unless it's a famine where you're pushed out of where you're at, if it's a rolling like a mobile famine, like you're moving versus a static famine, like if it's a static famine, interestingly, a lot of people go home and die at home. Interestingly, and like
Mike, I think you froze up. For everybody listening, I think you froze up. I'll text him right now. Yeah, you froze up. Yeah, he's frozen right now. I'll try to. This is always the hardest part of the podcast is vamping while I text the guest. Yeah, Stephen Hatfield, Dr. Stephen Hatfield's book 3 Seconds to Midnight, talking about pandemics, and he wrote that book like 3 months before before COVID broke out. He froze up and he's not said my text wasn't delivered. So for anybody listening knew that we tried to do this show last week and it completely fucked up because the internet shut down. Not shut down, it was just shit. I just texted him. said, yo, you froze up. And it's not going through, so that might be the case. We'll wait like 2 minutes. For the podcast, I normally wait like 15 minutes if guest is late, and then I'll shut it down. With internet being fucky, I'll wait like 2 to 3 minutes. That's normally like a pretty good barometer. I feel like absolute dog shit right now. I've been shitting my brains out all morning. Woke up like 3 hours before I normally wake up. I genuinely feel like horse shit. I probably look like it too. I'm trying not to fall asleep. Yeah, I think the internet cut out. Well, we'll sit around for another minute or two, see if it comes through. Yeah, well, what I was gonna say is to him talking about kind of these weakened systems within systems, the submunitions to the munitions are. It seems like that's often the case, and I always try to come back to this analogy of watching a fire. Right, you're up at a lake house watching a bonfire. The fire obviously it starts, you throw something in it, fucking takes off. It's whatever, You're up there, you at like a KKK rally, whatever you guys do during the summer, and it takes off, but then it will kind of look static for almost an hour, maybe 2 hours, where like it doesn't really move. It's just kind of crackling, and then the whole thing will collapse. And that's kind of how I'm so sorry. I feel like dog shit. The whole thing will collapse suddenly, and it looks like it happened in a moment, but it didn't happen in a moment. The reality is that these stages were being set as the thing was coming apart, and then just whoom, all comes down. But yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I don't know if this is like a blessing from God that the internet cut out, because I do kind of have to go shit. He's not responding to the. Oh, you just got it. All good. Said he lost it. Sounds good. Stay safe from my poop virus. All right, so yeah, so his internet cut out like 3 minutes ago. Well, guess we're wrapping it up. Guys, if you go to the description, you can follow Mr. Michael Yon on Twitter. He's Michael Yon Jungle. That's YON. And wait. No, that's the next guest. Yeah, so for now, I'm gonna maybe go shit my brains out for like 20 minutes, and I got 2 more shows today. Fuck. Yeah, I'm really not feeling well. We gotta not yet, doctor. So we're gonna wrap this one up for now. I'm gonna go shit my brains out, and then we're gonna start another podcast in about 20 minutes, and I'm gonna pretend like everything's okay. All right, y'all. Much love. Thanks for watching.